Who are you? This question is a matter of the highest importance. When Jesus came to earth, he claimed that the entire destiny of every man, woman, and child would depend upon how they viewed him. If his claims are true, the decisions we make about Jesus will determine whether we spend eternity with him or without him. Nothing could be more important. Peter Joseph produced a film entitled Zeitgeist. The film is broken into several parts. The first part, and the only part we will be focusing on, deals with the Christian religion. The film specifically argues that Christianity is mainly derived from other religions, astronomical assertions, astrological myths, and tradition, which in turn were derived or shared elements from other traditions. It continues by arguing that the historical Jesus is a literary and astrological hybrid nurtured politically. The work of D.M. Murdoch, author of The Christ Conspiracy, the greatest story ever sold, is used extensively in part one of the movie to argue that the concept of Jesus Christ is a myth and states that the Christ story is a fabrication. She also acted as a consultant for part one of the movie. So now it is time to take a second look at the Zeitgeist movie.
This is the sun. As far back as 10,000 BC, history is abundant with carvings and writings reflecting people's respect and adoration for this object. And it is simple to understand why, as every morning the sun would rise, bringing vision, warmth, and security, saving man from the cold, blind, predator-filled darkness of night. Without it, the cultures understood the crops would not grow and life on the planet would not survive. These realities made the sun the most adored object of all time. Likewise, they were also very aware of the stars. The tracking of the stars allowed them to recognize and anticipate events which occurred over long periods of time, such as eclipses and full moons. They in turn cataloged celestial groups into what we know today as constellations.
The first part is fairly accurate, but then when he starts talking about the stars, well, he claims that they were cataloged celestial groups. While this is true for some civilizations, others, such as the Incas, actually categorized the dark spot, not the stars themselves.
This is the cross of the zodiac, one of the oldest conceptual images in human history. It reflects the sun as it figuratively passes through the 12 major constellations over the course of a year. It also reflects the 12 months of the year, the 4 seasons, and the solstices and equinoxes. The term zodiac relates to the fact that constellations were anthropomorphized, or personified, as figures or animals.
That statement implies that the constellations and the zodiacs have always been connected, and that there have been just 12. While the zodiac's exact origins are unknown, the oldest known zodiacs do not have exactly 12 signs, and thus conclusions drawn to this cannot be trusted. For example, the Babylonian zodiacs originally consisted of 18 signs, and the Mayan zodiacs consisted of 20. While the Egyptian and Greek zodiacs do contain 12 signs, I think it's important to mention that the 12 signs are not some undeniable truth that can easily be recognized by all civilizations. In fact, there are exactly 13 constellations the sun passes through. The one missing is Ophiuchus, which is not counted by modern astrologers for some reason.
In other words, the early civilizations did not just follow the sun and stars, they personified them with elaborate myths involving their movements and relationships. The sun, with its life-giving and saving qualities, was personified as a representative of the unseen creator or God, God's Son, the light of the world, the savior of humankind. Likewise, the 12 constellations represented places of travel for God's Son, and were identified by names, usually representing elements of nature that happened during that period of time. For example, Aquarius, the water bearer, who brings the spring rains.
The sun was not the creator in all cultures, but rather only in a few. While the sun is widely worshipped, more often than not, most religions believe that the earth was given birth to alongside the sun and the moon by a different god, or in one case, the earth is on the back of a turtle. The film's view is hardly something that can be seen through most religions, and is stretching things a bit here. And the whole concept of saying God's Son, the light of the world, the Savior of mankind, is a setup for a comparison for Jesus. And something else that makes little sense here. If the Son itself is God and the Creator, why would they refer to it as God's Son, implying that the Son is not a God? This is just another way of setting up an idea that God's Son equals God's Son, and it is also inaccurate because they are only similar in English and the Bible is not written in English. This is part of a setup because it is implying that God's Son is the same as God's Son, even though the connection is impossible.
This is Horus. He is the sun god of Egypt of around 3000 BC. He is the sun anthropomorphized, and his life is a series of allegorical myths involving the sun's movement in the sky. From the ancient hieroglyphics in Egypt, we know much about this solar messiah. For instance, Horus, being the sun or the light, had an enemy known as Set, and Set was the personification of the darkness or night. And, metaphorically speaking, every morning Horus would win the battle against Set, while in the evening Set would conquer Horus and send him into the underworld. It is important to note that dark versus light, or good versus evil, is one of the most ubiquitous mythological dualities ever known, and is still expressed on many levels to this day.
At around 3000 BC, Horus was the god of the sky, and Ra was the god of the sun. Perhaps inevitable, since he was the sky, eventually the moon and the sun were considered his eyes. At this point he was known as Herukhati, and by he was combined with Ra, as the god Rehorekti. While there was a battle between Set and Horus, it was hardly every night. In fact, the battle really only happened once, and had more to do with testicles and semen than night and day. In fact, day and night in Egyptian mythology was much more complicated than the film suggests. The goddess of the sky was called Nut, or Nut. Her name also means night. At dusk she would swallow Ra, the sun god, and he would stay in her uterus until morning, when he would be reborn. She wore a blue dress that was covered in stars. Set was the god of the desert, primarily because Horus cut off one of his testicles and he became infertile like the desert. At this time, Set was not considered evil. It was not until around 100 AD that the Romans in Egypt turned Set into a demonic figure,